Every moment presents itself exactly as it is. The world does not bend to desire, nor do thoughts and feelings yield to force. You cannot command calm, nor can you summon peace by pushing away discomfort. Yet so often, we treat life as if it must conform to our wishes, and we mistake struggle for progress. The Stoics observed this centuries ago. It is not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Understanding this is the first step toward freedom. We spend much of our lives chasing what we think will make us complete, assuming that satisfaction lies in external outcomes. Recognition, wealth, success, these appear to promise fulfillment, yet each attempt to grasp them tightens the grip of tension instead of releasing it. The mind, when forced, resists. Effort applied to controlling what cannot be controlled only strengthens the power of what troubles us. This paradox is subtle, yet it is at the heart of human restlessness. True steadiness does not come from shaping the world to our liking, nor from erasing discomfort. It comes from attending to what is within our control, our perception, our judgment, our responses. By cultivating this inner clarity, we begin to move through life without being consumed by every thought or feeling. Peace emerges not as a prize to be won, but as a natural byproduct of understanding, discipline, and mindful attention. This is the path the Stoics walked, and it remains relevant now as much as it was centuries ago. The mind often behaves in ways that surprise us. The more you try to suppress a thought, the more it dominates attention. The more you resist a feeling, the more it shapes your experience. This is not a failure of willpower. It is the nature of awareness itself. Thoughts and emotions cannot be forced into compliance. They arise, persist, and fade according to patterns that are often beyond direct control. When we attempt to manipulate them through sheer effort, we inadvertently give them energy and significance. What we call suffering often emerges not from circumstances themselves, but from the struggle against them, the insistence that reality be different from what it is. Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The insight is clear. The locus of control lies within, and freedom is found not by battling the contents of consciousness, but by changing the relationship to them. This pattern extends to the desires we cling to. We believe that fulfillment lies in achieving something external, recognition, wealth, validation. And yet, the harder we pursue these things as a source of satisfaction, the more fragile our sense of contentment becomes. Every unmet expectation, every delay, every perceived failure reinforces the sense that we lack something essential. Seneca observed, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Desire, when conflated with necessity, traps the mind in a cycle of perpetual chasing. True stability emerges only when we loosen the attachment to outcomes and allow life to unfold without constant judgment or compulsion. By observing desire rather than being driven by it, we reclaim a measure of calm that effort alone cannot create. The process of letting go does not require withdrawal or passivity. Action continues, responsibility remains, and life proceeds. The difference lies in the orientation of the mind. When the focus shifts from controlling outcomes to observing and responding, clarity emerges. Thoughts lose their weight, emotions lose their intensity, and the persistent tension of expectation begins to dissolve. What was once a constant undercurrent of anxiety and self-judgment begins to recede. Habits of compulsive striving slowly give way to intentional presence. Even small moments gain richness that was previously obscured by incessant evaluation and comparison. In this quiet space, life begins to feel lighter, not because it has changed externally, but because perception has shifted. There is also a subtle transformation in how challenges are experienced. When expectations loosen, obstacles do not trigger disproportionate distress. Situations are faced with measured attention rather than reactive tension. The mind engages with reality as it unfolds rather than forcing it into a preferred shape. Freedom from attachment does not eliminate effort, it refines it. Actions are guided by insight and judgment, not by anxiety or compulsion. Even discomfort becomes a teacher, an occasion for observation rather than an object of resistance. In this way, peace is not a static state, but a dynamic engagement with the present, where clarity and equanimity coexist with life's inevitable uncertainties. As this awareness deepens, relationships, work, and daily interactions gain a new texture. Without the need for validation or constant comparison, engagement becomes more authentic. Conversations are less performative and more present. Tasks are approached with clarity and deliberation rather than with fear of failure or anticipation of reward. The mind, no longer burdened by constant striving, finds space to respond creatively and deliberately. In subtle ways, the quality of experience improves. The world is no longer measured solely by what is gained or achieved, but by what is observed, absorbed, and lived fully in each moment. Ultimately, the shift is not dramatic, but cumulative. It is the gradual loosening of tension, the conscious observation of patterns, the acceptance that not all thoughts and feelings are to be controlled. The paradox is profound. In releasing the compulsion to force outcomes, the mind discovers freedom, clarity, and stability. Happiness is no longer a distant prize, but a byproduct of mindful engagement. The effort that remains is deliberate, precise, and aligned with internal values rather than imposed by external pressures. Life becomes less a struggle to control and more an opportunity to experience, understand, and respond. If you've found these ideas resonating and want to continue cultivating clarity and inner freedom, consider subscribing. It's a choice to reflect more deeply, observe your mind with attention, and practice Stoic principles in daily life. That idea can feel subtle at first, almost too simple to take seriously. But when you begin to observe it, it becomes difficult to ignore. A feeling arises, maybe discomfort, maybe restlessness, and almost immediately, a judgment follows. This shouldn't be here. I don't want this. Something is wrong. And in that moment, the experience changes. What was once just a sensation becomes a problem, not because of what it is, but because of how it's being interpreted. This is where conflict begins, not in the feeling itself, but in the rejection of it. You're no longer just experiencing something, you're resisting it, and that resistance splits your attention. Part of you is feeling, another part is pushing back. That division creates tension, and that tension is often what people mistake for the original problem. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus expressed it clearly when he said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." That line points directly to the source of the struggle. It's not the discomfort that traps you, it's the belief that the discomfort shouldn't exist. Once that belief is in place, everything changes. You start trying to fix what isn't actually broken. You start chasing a version of yourself that doesn't feel what you're feeling. And in doing so, you move further away from any sense of stability. Because now, your peace depends on conditions being perfect, on thoughts being quiet, on emotions behaving a certain way, and life rarely works like that. So instead of asking how to remove discomfort, the Stoic approach shifts the question entirely. It asks whether discomfort needs to be removed at all, whether it's possible that the experience itself is neutral and it's only your interpretation that turns it into something negative. That's not an easy shift to make because it challenges something deeply ingrained, the idea that feeling good is the goal and feeling bad is something to avoid. But what if that division is where the problem begins? The moment you label something as bad, you create a reason to resist it. And resistance, as you've seen, doesn't make things disappear. It makes them persist. It keeps your attention locked onto the very thing you're trying to move away from. There's a kind of quiet clarity that emerges when you begin to see this pattern, not as a theory, but as something happening in real time. A feeling arises, and instead of reacting immediately, you notice the judgment forming. You see the urge to push it away. And for a moment, you don't follow that urge. You let the experience exist without interference. At first, that can feel unnatural, almost uncomfortable in a different way, because you're used to doing something about what you feel. Letting it be can feel like inaction, but it's not passive, it's deliberate. It's choosing not to add anything unnecessary to the experience, and in that space, something subtle begins to shift. The feeling may still be there, but it's no longer amplified by resistance. It's not being constantly checked, measured, or judged. It's just there, and because of that, it begins to move on its own. Not because you forced it to, but because you stopped holding it in place. This doesn't mean every feeling disappears quickly or easily. Some linger, some return. But the relationship changes. You're no longer trapped in a cycle of reaction. You're not trying to control what isn't directly controllable, and that alone reduces a significant amount of unnecessary tension. Over time, this approach builds a different kind of stability. Not one that depends on everything feeling right, but one that remains steady even when things don't. Because your sense of balance isn't tied to the absence of discomfort, it's rooted in how you relate to it. And that's the quiet shift the Stoics were pointing to. Not a dramatic transformation, but a reorientation. From control to understanding, from resistance to acceptance, from constantly fixing your internal state to simply observing it without judgment. It doesn't remove life's challenges. It doesn't make everything easy, but it changes the way those challenges are experienced. And sometimes that's the difference between feeling overwhelmed and feeling grounded. The moment you stop treating every uncomfortable experience as something that needs to be eliminated, you begin to see that many of them were never as powerful as they seemed. They were just amplified by the way you were holding them. Desire has a subtle way of presenting itself as necessity. It wears the guise of reason, often whispering that you must achieve more, be more, or possess more. You tell yourself that a promotion will make life better, that recognition will validate your worth, that accumulating experiences will fill an emptiness inside. Each of these thoughts feels logical, even urgent, as if they are requirements for survival. And yet, beneath that logic lies a quieter, more pervasive assumption that the present moment, the current version of yourself, is insufficient, that where you are now is lacking, that you cannot simply exist here without striving further. It is this hidden layer of judgment that fuels the persistent sense of scarcity in life, the feeling that no matter what you do, it will never be enough. The more closely you examine it, the more you see how desire constructs its own momentum. You pursue something you believe will fill a void, and each step reinforces the idea that you are incomplete. The goal, rather than providing relief, becomes a measure of inadequacy. Every obstacle, every delay, every minor shortfall is interpreted as evidence of your insufficiency. And in this way, desire becomes both the problem and the lens through which you view the problem. You may think you are chasing fulfillment, yet you are in fact chasing a reflection of absence. The mind begins to equate achievement with self-worth, and you begin to believe that your contentment depends on conditions outside of your immediate influence. Consider how often these perceived necessities infiltrate ordinary life. You believe you need recognition from peers, but underlying that is a deeper question. Do you believe your own judgment of yourself is inadequate? You pursue status or accolades, yet the moment they are achieved, the mind quickly recalibrates, setting the bar slightly higher, slightly further away. Confidence, fulfillment, and success all are framed as requirements for contentment, yet contentment itself is postponed indefinitely. Each desire masquerades as an urgent mandate, compelling action and attention, reinforcing the perception that the present moment is insufficient. The mind, caught in this rhythm, rarely pauses to evaluate the cost of its own pursuit. What begins as ambition subtly transforms into compulsion. There is no visible malice, no conscious intent to suffer, yet the pattern is powerful. The mind interprets desire as evidence of inadequacy. It interprets striving as a solution rather than a symptom. Each effort, each step, validates the narrative that something essential is missing. And while the external markers of success or accomplishment might increase, the internal sense of completeness remains elusive. This is why the pursuit of goals can sometimes feel hollow. The journey is fueled not by intrinsic aspiration, but by the pressure of an internal vacuum that cannot be satisfied externally. There is a delicate distinction here that is often overlooked. Desire, when recognized as a natural impulse, is not inherently harmful. Striving for growth, setting meaningful objectives, and seeking improvement are integral to human experience. The problem arises when desire is mistaken for necessity, when external achievement is interpreted as the primary source of stability. The Stoics taught that the locus of control, the center of agency, resides within judgment and choice, not in events beyond one's influence. Anchoring fulfillment to impermanent outcomes is inherently precarious. By redirecting attention to what is under your control, the mind gains freedom from the relentless cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. The consequences of misunderstanding this dynamic are subtle but profound. They manifest as restlessness, impatience, and a pervasive sense of insufficiency. The mind continually evaluates itself against shifting standards, constantly measuring what it lacks rather than appreciating what it holds. This creates a tension between presence and pursuit, where even moments of success are tinged with the awareness of what remains unachieved. Desire, when misapplied, functions as both motivator and prison, propelling action while simultaneously fostering a sense of emptiness. It is a paradox that has engaged thinkers for millennia. The very drive meant to secure satisfaction often guarantees its elusiveness. Over time, the consequences of this discernment are profound. Freed from the illusion that fulfillment depends on external acquisition, the mind develops a steadier, more resilient orientation. The focus shifts from chasing absent conditions to engaging fully with the present. Satisfaction becomes less contingent on outcome and more aligned with perception, with judgment, with the internal faculties over which you maintain influence. Desire no longer functions as a tyrant, subtly shaping experience and reinforcing lack. Instead, it becomes a tool, a means for growth without enslavement. The more you practice this awareness, the more you experience a quiet liberation. The recognition that what you are pursuing externally is often already reflected internally once the lens of compulsion is removed. The Stoics knew that this insight does not eliminate all ambition or effort. It does, however, reframe the relationship with striving. By recognizing that attaching well-being to external conditions fosters dependency, you gain the capacity to pursue goals without becoming psychologically bound to them. Each choice, each action, is informed by clarity rather than urgency. The mind becomes less reactive, more deliberate, and more attuned to what is under its own governance. In this way, the cycle of chasing absence can be softened, and the underlying presence of sufficiency, often obscured by craving, can be acknowledged and embraced. There's a subtle transformation that occurs the moment you release the constant pursuit of something beyond your reach. Not by abandoning action, not by settling into indifference,